over to House Hoops on X, which captured this moment. And Breonna Stewart is talking about that, among other.
For me, it's like, this is the first time we're in a revenue shared model. So before it was like, we had like a hard cap and we had a structure and you could have 220 max and everything else kind of trickled down. You know, now we're going to like really blow that out of the water, which is incredible, but making sure that we have like the amenities and the resources. And if we don't get what we want, we will sit out, but we don't want to do that.
A moment like that cuts through all the talking points. When a star finally says the quiet part out loud, it forces everyone to look at the math instead of the slogans. Because the truth is simple. A work stoppage is not a shared sacrifice in this league. A small slice of the player pool has the kind of money and outside income that can absorb missed checks. The rest do not. Most players are living on season-to-season cash flow, budgeting around those game checks, housing, training costs, and everything that comes with staying in shape year-round. So when the conversation shifts from negotiating to striking, it stops being a theoretical power move and becomes a real threat to the people with the least room to breathe. And that's where the tension spikes. Because once you acknowledge that reality, you have to ask who a strike actually serves. Is it a tool to lift everyone? Or is it leverage that only feels safe to push when you already have a safety net? It's uncomfortable, but it matters. Because the loudest voices are not always the most vulnerable voices.
We talked about the conflict of interest, which really does figure into all of this. You have a Breonna Stewart and a Nafisa Collier who own a different league, yet they're the ones negotiating. Particularly Nafisa Collier, she's the one who's been out there. She's been talking a whole lot. And meanwhile, they're okay because they have a whole different league. And then Project B came along, and then Project B would be at the same time as a rival. So not quite sure how that's all going to work out. It's just a very convoluted type.
Then you layer in the part that makes this even messier. Some of the most influential figures in the labor fight also have business interests outside the WNBA ecosystem. When top players are simultaneously advocating hardline positions while also building alternative leagues and side ventures, it creates unavoidable questions about incentives. Even if their intentions are pure, the optics are brutal. Any disruption to the WNBA calendar can shift attention, money, and opportunity toward those outside projects. And the gap between the tiers turns into the whole story. The stars have endorsements, equity, and options. The middle and lower tiers have bills. They have leases. They have deadlines that do not care about long-term strategy. So the real pressure point in this CBA fight is not just owners versus players. It's also the internal divide between the players who can afford to gamble and the players who cannot.
I think that for me personally, like the closer it gets to WNBA season, we're prepared to do it, to not play, but we don't want to. We want to play because we know how important it is to be on the court for a number of reasons, for the people, for the fans, for the city. But it'll be something that's really tough if push comes to shove, because, you know, like you said, you're comparing apples to oranges. The W and the NBA, like, contracts are vastly different.
Very skewed, yeah.
So it's like, yeah, the top 10, maybe 15 players can survive without a W contract.
Right.
But the rest, it's like, no, you don't want to go that much without getting paid.
Let's focus on what's actually being discussed, because this is where the "we're getting shorted" argument gets a lot shakier. The league's latest reported offer is not just another tiny bump to the old system. It's built around a revenue-sharing component that would scale pay upward as league income grows, instead of relying on the same slow, fixed-rate increases that have defined most of the WNBA's salary history. And the starting point matters. Under the current structure, the 2025 cap is about $1.5 million per team, with a max salary a little over $214,000 and a supermax around $249,000. So when you hear that the proposal could push maximum compensation above $1 million, Once revenue share is included, that's not a cosmetic change. It's a complete rewrite of what top of the market even means in this league. Now, Stewart's point about expansion fees and valuations is also real, and it's why this debate is so combustible. Golden State's expansion price was widely reported at about $50 million, and the league has since moved toward dramatically higher numbers for later franchises. Meanwhile, team values have surged. Sportico's 2025 estimates had the average franchise well above the old barely nine figures era, with several teams valued in the hundreds of millions. But here's the tension point. A richer-looking league does not automatically mean the operating model is throwing off profit at the same pace. Reporting has repeatedly noted that the WNBA has historically run at a loss, with Adam Silver previously acknowledging long-term losses since the league's founding. And yes, the union's strike authorization was overwhelming, around 93% by multiple reports. But recent coverage also suggests the internal conversation is getting more complicated as deadlines, free agency, and expansion logistics collide.
Personally, as WNBA players, it's like, well, we've signed however many CBA deals before, and we just don't want to get gypped. We don't want to feel like we're signing something and we're actually getting like screwed, because now we know how much you need us. We see the valuations between all the teams and all the things and the expansion fees, and it's like, no, there's a lot of money behind this, so like, don't forget to pay us too. So it's just really a back and forth battle.
Would you say y'all are prepared not to play this season? I know you want to, but would you say you're prepared not to play?
We've approved the strike authorization vote, which means that we're able to formally lock out whenever we want because we have majority of the players' votes.
Some of the pushback you're hearing isn't coming from the spotlight. It's coming from veterans who are looking at their budgets, looking at the date on the calendar, and realizing the margin for error is gone. When you're not sitting on outside league money or major endorsement checks, waiting it out isn't a strategy, it's risk. And by February, that risk gets loud. Because the league schedule doesn't care about internal debate. Training camps are supposed to open in late April, which means the runway to get a deal done is already shrinking. This is where the union dynamic gets uncomfortable. The players speaking the toughest in public are often the ones who can afford the toughest stance. That's not an insult. It's just math. When Natasha Cloud throws out a line like, accepting this would be stupid, it lands differently depending on who's hearing it. For the stars, it's leverage talk. For the middle of the roster, it can sound like someone else volunteering them to miss checks. And that creates a quiet power imbalance inside WNBPA. Not because the rank and file doesn't matter, but because the narrative is steered by the names the media will book, quote, and amplify. When the most influential voices can afford to be patient, patience becomes the official posture, even if a big chunk of the locker room is feeling financial panic. Now here's the part that should make every fan nervous. Breanna Stewart saying, "We don't want to strike, but we will," is the real headline, because it turns a negotiation into a countdown. And the timing could not be worse for the league's momentum. The WNBA just came off a record-setting year by its own metrics. Total attendance hit 2,353,735, up 48% year over year, with an average of 9,807 fans per game. Viewership also surged, including an average of 1.19 million viewers across ESPN platforms and 22 regular season broadcasts that cleared 1 million viewers. Merchandise sales spiked too, with league merchandise up 601% year over year in the WNBA's own reporting. That's the breakthrough window. That's the moment you're supposed to protect. And if the league drifts into a missed start, the damage isn't just a delayed tip-off. It's lost continuity, lost attention, and a reset button on the exact growth curve that players have spent decades fighting to create. Once you lose that kind of momentum, you do not just pick it back up like nothing happened. Casual fans drift, TV windows get replaced, sponsors reallocate budgets, and the league ends up spending the next season trying to rebuild attention instead of building on it. Now, when Breanna Stewart talks about the gap between WNBA pay and NBA pay, she's not wrong about the gap. The difference is massive. An NBA minimum salary clears 7 figures depending on service time, and even the baseline for young players is still real money by any standard. Meanwhile, the WNBA's top end has been sitting around that $241,000 supermax range in the current structure. But here's what changes the entire argument. You cannot compare salary scales without comparing the revenue engines underneath them. The best public estimates put WNBA revenue in the low hundreds of millions, roughly around the $200 million to $226 million range in 2024, depending on the source and what's counted. NBA revenue is in a completely different universe. For example, Forbes-based reporting has NBA teams generating about $11.3 billion in revenue for the 2023 to 24 season. That is not a small gap, it's a structural gap. And it explains why the NBA can sustain million-dollar minimums while the WNBA is still fighting over what fair looks like inside a much smaller pie. That's also why the revenue-sharing concept matters so much. The reported framework in the current WNBA proposal is basically this: raise the base numbers substantially, then link future growth to league revenue so player pay scales automatically if the league keeps climbing. Reuters has reported an offer structure that includes a $1 million max base salary starting in 2026, revenue sharing on top, and a salary cap that would grow annually in line with league revenue. And if you believe the growth trend continues, that type of model can beat a fixed set of numbers fast. Fixed numbers look good on day one, then inflation and new media deals make them feel outdated. A revenue-linked system moves with the business. But that requires trust. Trust that growth is real, measurable, and shared. Trust that the accounting is transparent. Trust that the league will not move the goalposts once the momentum is secured. And based on Stewart's tone, that trust is the missing ingredient. Here's the situation as it stands, and why the timeline is doing as much damage as the negotiating terms.
So a few takeaways from what Breanna Stewart said. Number one, she said, we see how much y'all need us. Now, some people might strongly disagree with that. Are you really needed? Number two, she said, we don't want to be gypped. Now, I showed the numbers from the leaked proposal, reportedly leaked proposal last night. We've talked about numbers a number of times. I don't know how you can look at those numbers and feel that you're being gypped. And a lot of people feel the same way. Gypped? Interesting word for those numbers. Number three, she acknowledges that there are players who need.
It's February and the league calendar is not flexible. Training camps are scheduled to begin in late April, which means the window to finalize a deal is already tightening. Every week that passes without resolution increases the chance of a disrupted start, and the stakes of that disruption are bigger than people want to admit. Because the reported offer on the table is not business as usual. Multiple reports have described a proposal that would fundamentally change how players get paid, including a revenue-sharing component and a salary structure that scales with league growth. It also reportedly includes major improvements like higher base compensation and broader quality-of-life upgrades. Reuters described it as a package featuring a $1 million max base salary beginning in 2026, revenue sharing on top of that, and a salary cap that would rise with league revenues. That's why the internal divide matters so much. When you're a star with endorsements, equity plays, and off-season options, you can treat a strike threat like a pressure tactic. When you're not, you treat it like an emergency. That's the core imbalance inside the room. The players most exposed to a work stoppage are often the least positioned to steer the public message, even if they make up the majority. And it's not hard to see why this is turning into a battle over percentages instead of progress. The top tier wants a larger slice and stronger guarantees. From their perspective, they're trying to lock in the next era before the league's revenue explodes even further. From the league's perspective, locking in aggressive guarantees is risky if profitability and cash flow still lag behind valuations and expansion headlines. But the NBA comparison, while emotionally powerful, is still an apples to industries comparison. The WNBA is growing fast, but its revenue base is still far smaller than the NBA's. Estimates around WNBA revenue for 2024 land in the low hundreds of millions, while NBA revenue sits in the tens of billions. You can argue the split should change, but you cannot pretend the underlying economics are the same. And this is where the moment becomes the real battleground. The league just posted a record season by its own reporting, with attendance and viewership surging and merchandise growth exploding. The attention is real, and that attention is leverage. But leverage only matters if you convert it into a deal before the public moves on. If the season gets delayed or derailed, the damage isn't just to owners. It's to the exact commercial momentum that could make the next contract cycle even richer. Sponsors do not like uncertainty. Broadcasters do not schedule around chaos. Casual fans do not wait patiently for labor headlines. So the fear isn't that players are wrong to push. The fear is that they push past the point where the league's growth window stays open. And if that happens, the harsh reality is that the people who pay the biggest price will not be the stars who can ride out the storm. It will be the middle and lower tiers who lose checks, lose roster security, and lose the stability they've been trying to build their whole careers. Average is real, but it is not permanent. It's a window, not a guarantee. And if you hold that window open too long, it closes on its own. Sports history is full of examples where a work stoppage didn't just pause the product, it broke the habit. The clearest warning sign is the NHL. The 2004-05 lockout erased an entire season, and the league has openly acknowledged that it damaged its momentum and took years to regain ground. Once fans lose the routine of watching, a big portion never rebuilds it, especially if they weren't deeply attached in the first place. That's the danger zone for the WNBA. The WNBA's recent surge has been huge, but a lot of that audience is still new. The league itself reported average viewership of about 1.19 million on ESPN platforms in 2024, with many games clearing the 1 million mark. That's growth you protect, because those viewers are not all lifelong loyalists. A meaningful share are casual fans who tuned in because the product finally cut through. The games felt urgent, the storylines traveled, and new stars pulled people in. Casual sports viewership is habit-driven. If you disrupt the habit for a full year, a lot of people do not return. They find another sport, another league, another routine. And here's the bitter irony. The players who would be hurt most by losing that momentum are also the players who can least afford the immediate cost of a stoppage. The top tier will still have options, endorsements, appearances, and outside income. They can outlast the calendar. But most roster spots in this league are not filled by people with deep financial cushions. They're filled by pros who rely on the season to stabilize everything else. That's why the internal tension matters. It's not owners versus players in a clean line. It's also stars versus the economic reality of the middle and bottom tiers. And when the loudest negotiating posture is being set by the least financially exposed players, the union starts to look upside down. Because the point of collective action is to raise the floor while fighting for the ceiling, not to risk the floor in pursuit of the ceiling. The union's job is to protect its most vulnerable members first, because they're the ones who have the least ability to absorb a misstep. Yes, the Players Association can talk about strike funds, planning, amenities, and support systems, but none of that changes the basic equation. Support structures can help, but they do not replace game checks.
Only maybe the top 10 or 15 are not in that category. She understands that. Number 4, yes, they understand that, but they are still prepared to strike nonetheless. And they will. 5, if they don't get what they want, she said. So no, Breonna Stewart is not tone deaf. She is not lacking in understanding that this decision is a huge one that affects some people, most people, more than others. Others who own different leagues, or who are playing in different leagues, who have money from endorsements, and what are the top players, they are not going to probably lose much sleep now over this decision if they choose not to play. Now, I say now because it would be a colossal mistake if they ruin this moment. And I think it will come back.
They do not cover rent, childcare, car payments, or the training costs that never stop. The league can survive bad headlines. Individual players cannot always survive missed income. That's why this moment is so delicate. The WNBA finally has the kind of mainstream attention that can permanently change salaries if it keeps compounding. The smartest play is converting that attention into a deal that locks in growth, builds trust, and puts the next negotiation in an even stronger position. If the season gets lost, the league may win a labor fight and still lose the war for relevance. Strike planning does not pay the bills. It doesn't cover childcare. It doesn't replace a season's worth of income for a player who's budgeting every month around a contract that was never designed to create long-term financial security. You can offer resources, you can offer support, and you can offer reassurance. But you cannot offer replacement paychecks at scale. For a lot of players, that's the entire point. So what happens next comes down to two hard realities colliding. On one side, the players have signaled they're willing to escalate. Reports have described a strong strike authorization vote and public comments that make it clear the union is prepared to use that leverage. On the other side, the league believes it has already put forward a package that qualifies as historic movement, including a revenue-sharing structure and major jumps in compensation that would have been unthinkable a few years ago. And the calendar doesn't care about anyone's messaging. Training camps are set to open in late April. That means the pressure isn't theoretical anymore. It's logistical. The pragmatic path, if you're prioritizing the broadest group of players, is to lock in the growth mechanism first. Accept the framework that ties pay to revenue, secure the quality of life improvements, and then fight the next battle from higher ground. Because if the league's business keeps rising, that model can become a compounding engine for salaries instead of a one-time win. But that approach requires something that is hard in any labor fight. It requires the people driving the public posture to prioritize the collective risk profile, not just the maximum possible upside. And that's where the criticism lands, fairly or not. When the loudest voices also have the most insulation, it becomes easy for the rest of the locker room to feel like the gamble is being made with someone else's rent money. The part that keeps hanging over this is that the stakes have already been stated out loud. The risk to momentum is not imaginary. The WNBA just delivered a record season by its own reporting, with major spikes in attendance, viewership, and merchandise. A disruption now would not just affect the 2025 paycheck. It could flatten the growth curve that makes every future negotiation easier. And if this ends with a delayed season or a canceled season, nobody outside the negotiation room is going to remember the fine print. Casual fans won't debate percentage points. Sponsors won't memorialize bargaining positions. The public memory will be much simpler. The league had a rare moment of national attention, and the product disappeared. So here's the question that actually matters. Are the players right to hold the line even if it risks the season, or should they bank the biggest structural progress they've ever been offered and build from there? Drop your answer in the comments, because whichever direction this goes, it will shape how this league grows, how it's covered, and what players get paid for years to come. This is the moment where talk turns into consequences, because a canceled season is not just a missed summer. It's a broken habit. It's a broken rhythm. And for a league that has spent years fighting for oxygen, losing the calendar means losing the audience you just earned. You don't get to pause momentum and pick it back up later, like it's saved in a file somewhere. When the games stop, the culture moves on. And that's what makes this so heavy. Not the arguments, not the headlines, the ripple effects. If the season slips, it won't be the stars who feel it first. The stars will still have cameras, brand partners, and safety nets. The first wave of damage hits the women whose contracts are small enough to disappear inside a missed month. The players who rely on that check to cover rent, childcare, training, and travel. The ones who don't have a cushion, don't have equity, and don't have a second league to fall back on. Their strike plan is not a plan. It's a cliff. And if this drags into April without a deal, that cliff is no longer theoretical. The hard truth is that unions are judged by who they protect when it gets ugly, not by who speaks the loudest, not by who has the biggest platform, but by whether the most vulnerable members walk away safer than they were before the fight started. If the end result is a work stoppage that bankrupts the bottom half of the roster while the top tier survives comfortably, that is not a win. That is a warning sign. And history will not remember the internal justifications. It will remember the outcome. It will remember that the WNBA finally had casual fans watching, sponsors competing, and media paying attention, and then the product vanished. It will remember that the league reached a breakthrough moment and the people holding the leverage chose to squeeze until the whole thing cracked. So the closing question is simple, and it's the only one that matters now. Is the goal to win the negotiation or to grow the league? Because if the season gets lost, everyone loses, and the players who needed this momentum the most will be the ones paying for it the longest. If you want the real breakdown as this develops, the behind-the-scenes pressure points, the union politics, the money math, and the next move before it hits the headlines, you already know where to find it. Tap in with Courtside Leaks and stay locked, because this isn't just a CBA story anymore. This is a turning point. We've got every angle covered, every leak, every backstage twist, every moment they won't show you. Hit like, subscribe, drop a comment, and share this video. Stay locked in with Courtside Leaks, your home for the truth behind the WNBA headlines.